Hi, I'm Steve Miller. I'm often asked what the best lighting technique is for shooting macro. So let's talk a little bit about lighting techniques that you can use for different macro subjects. When we say macro, we probably should say micro, because generally we're talking about really small stuff. What I like to tell people is think about your thumbnail and think about filling the frame with an object that's about that size. With the macro lenses we can use today, obviously we can zoom out to much larger objects. You can do a grouper face or a porcupine fish. So anything from the smallest of small, one-to-one, a nudibranch that would lay on your thumbnail, all the way up to a fish that was maybe about this big across. The macro lens is the lens of choice. One of the beautiful things about the macro lens is that you can come in so close that there's no real significant water between the lens and your subject. Therefore, all of the detail and the color of your subject is going to jump off of your film card because it's so close. So all of the detail isn't muddied out by this water column. If you increase this distance to even 2 feet or 3 feet, you're going to notice a big difference. You're going to notice that your photos start to get a bit washed out. So having said that, it's easy enough to frame a subject in very close with a macro lens. Now we get into some choices for lighting though. How you position your strobes can dramatically change the look of the shot. And that's why you see photographers often with these seemingly long arms, or certainly longer than you might need the arm to be. For example, for macro, if I wanted to just perfectly light this object, if I wanted it to be like a scientific ID photo, I could position my strobes like this. There won't be a shadow on my subject. He will be so bathed in light that every detail will come up. But that might not be the strongest photo. That might not be the image that you want to convey. Sometimes photos can be nice that have soft shadows in them. So what I can do with a dual arm assembly is, and obviously underwater, these will hold. I can bring both of my strobes on one side to create some soft shadows. You'll also see some guys out there doing very interesting work with side lighting and backlighting. Now in a situation like this, there is almost no light going directly on to the subject as far as from the camera's aspect point of view. But this does something interesting for us. If there's any scatter, and there is always scatter, if there's any scatter or particulate matter between the lens and your subject, the strobe's going to light it up, and it's going to look like snow or backscatter, it's often called. By side lighting it, I'm still lighting up the scatter, obviously, but the side of the scatter that I'm lighting isn't really facing the camera lens. So the short version is this. If you bring your strobes out to the side in murky or turbid water, you will have less scatter in your photograph than if you were to duplicate a very close aspect to similar to what the lens is seeing with your strobe, in which case you'd be lighting up the front of the scatter and exaggerating it. You can take this a step further, and it gets a little tricky, a little advanced, but some guys will actually bring their strobes out and around and backlight their subject. Backlighting can be very dramatic. A lot of the fish and the soft corals that we like to take pictures of are actually translucent. So they will allow the light to pass through them, but they'll alter it slightly, and you can get a bit of a glow or a rim effect from the light scooting over the back of the subject. Obviously, at this point, you have to be careful because if your strobe comes into the frame itself, you'll see that hot spot. And if the strobe light is pointing directly into the lens, you can get some weird reflections in there. So go ahead and play with your lighting and move your strobes around, knowing that every time you change the position of one or both of your lights, you're going to impact something, either the color, how translucent the object is, or how much scatter is present. Don't be afraid to experiment. This is one of the more advanced techniques, but it can be very rewarding if you practice with it.